Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Dirt Nap City. We are already into season 3, and man, things are getting exciting because now we're doing video as well as audio. Now we are making some little interstitial content in between our main episodes, doing lots of cool stuff in season 3. So if you haven't already followed and subscribed, do that now. But I want to say hello to my buddy Alex, who is sitting in Houston right now, and we are very excited to be kicking it off. How's it going, Alex?
Good. We've heard from the people and they want more of us. So we're giving you more of us.
Yeah.
Giving you
You're
more.
going to get a lot more of us.
Yeah.
That's the plan.
And there is no unsubscribe button.
Yeah. Once you're subscribed, you're a subscriber for life. It's
right.
kind of, if you really want to get in, there's a tattoo you can get.
And if you don't listen, we're going to start knocking on your door and just doing the podcast outside your window.
And throwing money in. Yeah. Almost like carolers, like Christmas carolers, only we're Christmas podcasters.
We assume that if you're not downloading, then you just forgot. So we're going to come find you.
Yeah, because, who doesn't want to know about interesting dead people? I know everyone I know loves it. So again, season 3, it's amazing how quickly we've kind of like gone through these and we're starting to catch our groove. And at some point we're going to get a sponsor. If you're interested in sponsoring us, you can of course email not@dirtnapcity. Do you have any ideas on good companies for sponsors? That's been a challenge for us to figure out.
Yeah, I mean, we started with, I think we got off a bad foot on episode 2 when we kept emphasizing that the mashed potatoes at KFC tasted like wallpaper paste.
Yeah.
That didn't help us.
No, and a lot of fast food companies that were considering us at that point dropped us. We were canceled.
We did a Ray Kroc episode where we talked about how we didn't. Well, no, actually, you talked about how you love McDonald's. It's your daughter that trashed McDonald's.
She called it McDisgusting. But if anybody's got ideas, I don't really want to resort to funeral homes, but if you do run a funeral home and you're interested in sponsoring us, we might take you up on it.
Yeah, I mean, anybody in the death care industry is welcome to sponsor us. It doesn't have to be morbid or anything like that.
No. It's part of life, man.
The last part.
Well, speaking of life, I've got somebody today, Alex, that lived a short but very, very rich life. He was born in 1945, February 6th, and he died in 1981. So, like I said, a short but rich life in May 11th. He was a musician, and he was in a fairly niche genre, but was probably considered the best or king of that genre.
So, are we talking rock and roll at all? Rock and roll adjacent?
Not rock and roll adjacent.
So it's not
really
Randy Rhoads.
No.
Okay.
That's a good guess.
Because I think that was about 1981.
Yeah, he died in 81. He is world famous. I'd say a lot more famous than Randy Rhoads, actually, in terms of people knowing him. I think, just about anybody who lives in Western culture knows this guy's name. And he was not actually from the United States. He was one of these guys from another country close to the United States, but not in the United States. And in his own country, he actually achieved what's called the Order of Merit.
So this must be Canada.
Other direction.
Or Jamaica. Bob Marley.
Yes. He was the Order of Merit. His name was actually Robert Nesta Marley.
I love Bob Marley. And I don't know if you and I have ever talked about Bob Marley before, but I love Bob Marley. And I listen to Bob Marley quite a bit still.
You can always throw that on, and it's never really gonna piss anybody off.
And I think he transcends time, never sounds dated, and it will always make you feel better.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that puts a smile on your face, generally. He's got some pretty charged political songs and was definitely an advocate for justice and, fairness and equality and a lot of things that a lot of people talk about these days, but he was into it pretty early on. but yeah, he was, I was also gonna the other 2 clues I was gonna give was he was a huge soccer fan, played a lot of soccer throughout his life,
That wouldn't have helped me.
and his, poster is probably one of the most popular,
Oh, yeah.
in college dorms.
Is that a postage stamp as well in Jamaica, do you know?
Yeah, I think so. Well,
Yeah.
as I said, he actually, was awarded the Order of Merit, and that is conferred upon Jamaicans or distinguished citizens of other countries who have who have achieved distinction in science, arts, literature, or any other endeavor to honor Jamaica. And what's cool about this award and interesting is there can only be, or there can be no more than 15 living persons who have it. So someone
Oh,
has to die for someone else to get the Order of Merit.
and it's only in Jamaica?
It's in Jamaica. Yep,
Yeah,
it's
so
where
I
it's given.
assume Usain Bolt probably has one, and some sprinters probably have them, athletes, but yeah, that's really cool. I can't wait to hear about Bob Marley.
And it's never given by more than 2 people in a single year. So or it's never given to more than 2 people in a single year. So basically 2 people could win it, but then once there's 15 living people with the OM, and then they get OM at the end of their, name. So
That's
he
cool.
is, Bob Marley, comma, OM. Like,
Did he get it posthumously, or did he ever get to enjoy that?
he did actually get it. He got a lot of stuff posthumously because he did die, as I said, he died in '81, born in '45. What would that be? Like
36?
36 years old, yeah.
Wow.
So he was born Robert Nesta Marley, OM. He was, of course, a singer songwriter, considered one of the pioneers of reggae music, and he really kind of came into it at a time when reggae was developing as a genre. There was ska, there was rocksteady, there was this kind of classical African inspired music at the
Skiffle?
time. Skiffle was a thing. That's right. You remember that. Um, and he became um, later in life. Now he was born Catholic, but he became a Rastafarian. And people kind of joke about Rastafarianism as just smoking a lot of pot, and that's involved in it. But it is actually an Abrahamic religion that was developed in the 1930s in Jamaica, and it's interesting because they're um, it's considered a newer social movement and religion, but it doesn't really have a central authority. There's no pope, there's no leader of the church. The Rastafari or Rastafarians or Rastas were basically believed that religion is monotheistic. There's only one God. It's referred to as Jah, and that Jah lives partially in every person. So we are all collectively Jah. Jah.
Mm, mm, okay.
Now I also mentioned it's an Abrahamic religion. Abrahamic, I think I'm saying that correctly. Do you know anything about that? I thought that was kind of an
I
interesting little
don't. No, I don't.
aside. Yeah, I didn't either. So it's a group of religions, and the 3 big ones are Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. And they're basically centered around the worship of the God of Abraham. And God Abraham was sort of the patriarch of everybody else that came in the scriptures, in the Quran, in the Bible, and so in Hebrew scriptures. So Rastafarianism again believed in a God that was one God, but took it a little bit differently because they also believed in a lot of the things that were going on and still maybe go on in Jamaica these days, which was kind of a little more ritualistic stuff, right?
Mm. Was he a very religious guy?
Yes, yes. Now he was biracial.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so Bob Marley was biracial. He was born to a gentleman named Norval Sinclair Marley and a woman named Selda Malcolm. And Norval Marley was actually from England, and he was white.
Mm.
And he was 60 years old when he married, I think it's Sedella. Sorry, Sedella, not Selda. Sedella Malcolm. She was an Afro Jamaican. She was 18 years old, and she was basically working at a plantation that he was overseeing.
Oh,
And he
wow.
actually married her. He married her. They had a son, but then Norval Marley was a captain in the British Navy, and he left. Like he kind of wasn't really around.
Oh,
So he
wow.
he had this son, but he did supposedly support the family, like, he sent money back to them. Um, he was not not present, but also didn't abandon them, kind of
Okay.
middle of the road. But, asking about, Bob Marley's, religious beliefs, um, because he was mixed race, he was often called white boy, which in Jamaica was a derogatory term. And he said it was a tough thing. Bob Marley said this growing up. And he said he developed this philosophy to say, I'm not on the white man's side or the black man's side. I'm on God's side.
Was it a lot of his music religious? Did he have religious messages, or were they kind of, metaphorical messages that maybe we didn't pick up on?
I think it's they were religious in the Rastafarian sense,
Yeah,
right? In the Rasta sense, and so more directed towards Jah and directed to the beliefs of the Rasta more than like traditional Catholicism or Christianity,
sure.
as you would think of it. So,
Okay.
so yes, they were religious, they were spiritual, but they weren't like traditional Christian religious.
Right, they weren't gospel music.
Early on, Bob Marley was running around with people like Peter Tosh.
Mhm.
And interestingly, Peter Tosh's, given name was actually McIntosh, like, his last name was
Oh,
McIntosh,
really? Okay.
and it was, Winston Hubert McIntosh, but, you've everybody who knows anything about reggae has heard of Peter
Yeah.
Tosh. Well, he was one of Bob Marley's original friends and one of the original
Mm.
Wailers.
What about Jimmy Cliff? Was he part of that crew?
He was not, but they ended up actually replacing Jimmy Cliff on Island Records. When they moved to Island Records, Jimmy Cliff had moved off of that label, and so they took the place,
They were rivals
um
probably, huh?
No, I feel like there was a lot of cooperation in this group because they all kinda know each other. I mean, Jamaica's not a big island, right?
No, no.
And so, um so anyway, they formed their first band, called the Teenagers, and that was Peter Tosh, Bunny Wailers, Bob Marley.
It's a funny name. It sounds like an American Bandstand kind of, clean cut white boys in the, 50s, the teenagers.
Yeah, yeah. Well, here's the kind of ironic part about it. Because of where Jamaica's located, a lot of their music was influenced by the US because radio stations could reach Jamaica,
Sure,
right? It's close enough to the US that they were extremely influenced by American music. There wasn't hip hop at the time, but American blues, American soul music, rock and roll, all was influenced, all influenced them. So in 1963, they formed the Teenagers. Well, they ended up changing their name to the Wailing Rude Boys.
mm,
So
wow,
and, you hear this sometimes with do you ever listen to the Specials?
no.
Okay. They have a song called, "A Message to You, Rudy," and there's this thing called Rude Boys, and they were sort of a music phenomenon. They were kinda guys that would get really rowdy at shows.
Mm,
And so this was a tribute to that, Wailing to the Wailing Rude Boys was a tribute to those rude boys at shows. They were, maybe like the early, less, racist version of skinheads or something like
or
that.
okay, so, like, mosh pits and that
Yeah.
kinda stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't that, but it's what eventually became that. So, they were the teenagers, then they were the, Wailing Rude Boys, and then they became the Wailing Wailers.
That's a little redundant, yeah.
They decided to change it to just the Wailers.
Yeah.
And so again, 3 of those really big, uh, named people, Bunny Wailer, Bob Marley, and Peter Tosh, all in this band initially.
Now, was Bunny Wailer's name Bunny Wailer? Like, w
No, his name was actually Neville Livingston.
oh.
So so
Okay,
totally changed it.
yeah.
Um, so they lived in this place called Trenchtown, which is a neighborhood in Kingston, and you probably heard Trenchtown Rock if you're a fan of, Bob Marley. That's like a song. Um They reference it quite a bit. It's like being from Harlem or
Mhm.
from some part of New York, or some
Bed-Stuy, yeah.
they were in Trenchtown. They actually recorded together early on, and were, like I said, very influenced by ska, by R&B from the United States because the radio stations could meet it, and they initially didn't play any instruments. They were more of a vocal harmony group, but they started to play instruments, learned how to play the guitar, and that's kind of when things started to take off. From like 1962 to 1972, the band recorded several songs and had a couple of hits right out of the gate. One called Judge Not, one called One Cup of Coffee, one called Do You Still Love Me, and one called Terror. But their first number 1 hit came in 1964 with a song called Simmer Down. Do you know that one? It's an old one.
Maybe I do.
It's been it's been sampled a lot.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I probably know it
You
from the
probably heard it,
samples.
"Simmer down, simmer down." Um, Anyway, big hit, 1964, sold 70,000 copies in Jamaica, and it was kind of a first little taste of fame, but it wasn't an international hit. It was just kind of more of a regional and local hit. In 1966, Bob Marley married Rita Anderson, and they actually moved to the United States for a little while because Marley's mother had married an American. She had actually moved to Wilmington, Delaware, and so they lived in Rita and Bob Marley lived in Wilmington, Delaware for a couple of years. And during that time, Bob Marley he worked at a DuPont lab, and he was a lab assistant. He was an assembly line worker, and he was also a forklift operator. So you imagine saying that you had worked with Bob Marley
Yeah, I mean, I've been to Wilmington, Delaware, and DuPont is everything in
yeah.
Wilmington, Delaware. So that's if you live in Wilmington, you probably work at DuPont. But yeah, can you imagine driving a forklift with Bob Marley?
Yeah, yeah, and not even know who the guy is, and
No.
then all of a sudden, you're hearing all these things. Well, he moved back to Jamaica, in, like, 67, 68. They were only in Wilmington for a little while, and that's around the time when reggae was really starting to take off. So, you're familiar with Toots and the Maytals, right?
Mhm.
The reggae band. They had a song called "Do the Reggae." And that was sort of the start of the sound that Bob Marley and the Wailers adopted, was
Okay.
was based a little bit on Toots and the Maytals. And they had, again, a little bit of local success, but nothing really huge took off, until the '70s, and that's when they signed with CBS Records, and they were actually um, on tour with a singer named Johnny Nash, and they were in London and they met a guy named Chris Blackwell. Now, Chris had bought the rights to some of these original reggae songs that they had recorded back in Jamaica, and they were kind of interested in wanting to um, buy the rights back or do some profit sharing or something because they weren't making any money off of this. Well, at the time, um, Chris Blackwell actually worked for Island Records, and he said, "I'll do you one better. Why don't I sign you to Island Records?" And as you mentioned earlier, Jimmy Cliff had just left Island Records, so they were trying to get a new band to take Jimmy Cliff's space during the early '70s on Island Records. Now, what Chris Blackwell said about them was, and this is a quote: "I was dealing with rock music, which was really rebel music, and I felt it would be a really good way to break Jamaican music to the to the masses.
Mm.
But you needed someone who had that image, and when Bob Marley walked in the room, he fit that image." And so they recorded an album called Catch Fire on Island Records, and that album was kind of their first big international thing.
I
Now,
think wasn't Elton John Island Records or Eric Clapton or like those were the rock guys I think he was talking about.
well,
I don't know.
interesting you say that because one of the things that really helped them take off was on the album Catch a Fire, not Catch Fire, Catch a Fire. One of the things that really helped them take off was that they had recorded this song called "I Shot the Sheriff." They wrote
Mm,
it and recorded it.
there you
Well,
go.
Eric Clapton covered that, and that was kind of the first taste that a lot of people had of their music, even though it was a cover song. And then on that same album, well, no, and then right after that, they had a big hit with, the live version of "No Woman, No Cry," right? You've
Right,
heard that
right, right.
song
Of
many
course,
times,
of course.
and that was kind of a big breakout song for them too.
Did you hear which version of "I Shot the Sheriff" did you hear first?
I think I heard the Eric Clapton version first.
Same, yeah, for
Yeah.
years, and then I really didn't get turned on to Bob Marley probably until after he was dead, right? Until I was in college, and I was like, I probably didn't even know that that was his song. I probably thought he covered Eric Clapton, and it's so much better than the Eric Clapton version, I think.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely and it's the one I know, like, in my head right now, I'm hearing the Bob Marley version of
Yeah,
it,
same.
but, unwittingly, Eric Clapton did a big favor to Bob Marley for making not only making him, some money, I guess, with royalties and getting attention, but also kind of legitimizing him as a songwriter, right?
Yeah, and it's funny because the songs aren't that different, like, the 2 versions aren't that different, but I wouldn't call Eric Clapton's version reggae either. There's just enough difference where it's a different style of music, but they're not that different.
Or I don't think that Eric Clapton really did anything too innovative with the song.
No, that's what I'm saying. He didn't really change it much, but I wouldn't call it reggae either. So it kind of lost in the translation or whatever, it lost some of its maybe that's why I don't like the version as much. I think that the original is superior just because I think it has more soul, maybe? I don't know what the word is.
Well, it feels to me the Bob Marley versions feels or the Wailers version feels more like a story, and the,
Yeah,
Eric
yeah.
Clapton version feels more like I don't know, kind of a quirky, almost, um, I don't know, almost like a gimmicky kinda song,
Or
you
a
know?
retelling of someone else's story at best, right?
Yeah, not their own story.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's a good way to
yeah.
put it.
Um, so, as I was saying, Chris Blackwell, I don't know if he was the owner of Island Records or what his role was at Island Records, but he is the one that signed them to Island Records. He also, he also gifted his residence in Kingston to Bob Marley and the Wailers, and that became their headquarters. And interestingly, Bob Marley actually lived there. He officed there. They recorded there. And do you remember the name of their studio? I think as soon as I say it, you'll recognize it.
Yeah, I probably will. What?
Tough Gong.
Oh, no, I hadn't heard that.
Oh, Tuffgong. I just remember seeing that logo on records, and
Oh, okay.
it became a label, like a sub-label, that Bob Marley started that was popular in Jamaica and then, had some hits. But they were scheduled to play 17 shows in the US. They were gonna travel and open for Sly and the Family Stone, which
Mm,
was hugely popular during the '60s and '70s, right?
yeah, yeah.
Um, however, according to my sources, after 4 shows, they were cut from the tour because they were becoming more popular than Sly and the Family Stone. More people were
Wow.
showing up to see them, and I guess Sly and the Family Stone didn't like that and said, "Nope, can't can't go with that."
Wow, that's interesting. Sly and the Family Stone were a really interesting band that would have been more popular if they were more reliable, but they would like sometimes not show up for gigs or show up in no condition to play or whatever. But if you want to see a good performance of Sly and the Family Stone, it's in that Rolling Stone movie, "Gimme Shelter,"
Yeah,
about the Altamont tour. Sly and the Family Stone play a few songs in that set. It's pretty cool.
and they're on point.
They are, and apparently that's one of the better shows that usually they would disappoint. They'd show up and they just weren't good because they were in no condition. But that's
Yeah, yeah.
pretty good show,
Yeah, which is a shame because, and I think that's not an uncommon thing in music, right? A little
especially
too
in the
many
'60s. Yeah.
little too much sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Um, so the band actually disbanded, the Wailers, in 1974. However, Bob Marley kept the name and became Bob. That's when it became Bob Marley and the Wailers. So before that, it had been just the Wailers, and it was kind of a, threesome of 3 leads with Bunny Wailer, Peter Tosh, and Bob Marley.
So the
But
original I Shot the Sheriff was just the Wailers.
yes, it was
Oh.
not Bob Marley and the Wailers,
Hmm.
um, on that Catch a Fire album. So then something really interesting happened in 1976. The Bob Marley and the Wailers were set to play a free concert, that was organized by the Jamaican Prime Minister, Michael Manley, and there was, I guess, some pretty intense, um, stuff going on between political groups in Jamaica at the time, like, kind of like Northern Ireland and Ireland,
Mhm.
that kind of stuff, like people killing each other and stuff. Well, somebody broke into, um, Bob Marley's home and shot, Bob Marley, Rita Marley, and Don Taylor, um, right before this show was supposed to happen, because they thought that the show was just a support for one side of the political spectrum, for this Michael Manley supporting the prime minister. It wasn't a concert organized by him, so that kind of made sense that they would think that. But
Yeah.
Rita and Don Taylor, their manager, so Rita, his wife, and Don Taylor, the manager, were actually pretty, seriously injured, recovered, but Bob Marley was shot in the chest and arm and was not injured enough to stop his performance. So he ended up playing this, show 2 days after he got shot by this guy,
Wow.
which is pretty awesome.
So it wasn't a quite a civil war, but it was definitely his political factions going on and a lot of political violence going on at the time.
Yep, yep, and the whole point or supposed point of that concert was to sort of ease the tension between the 2 groups. I don't know too much more about it, but that was sort of the point of it, and obviously, the people on the other side weren't happy about it. So, after this, incident in 1976, um, Bob Marley left Jamaica, went to the Bahamas to just recoup, from the shooting and probably the mental trauma of that, and then actually ended up going to England for 2 years. And he recorded 2 albums while he was in England, Exodus and Kaya,
Mhm.
and he Exodus was on the British album top charts for 56 consecutive weeks,
Wow.
and it included the song Exodus. You
Love that
probably know
song.
that because that's
Yeah.
that's on Legend. Jamming, Waiting in Vain, One Love, which was, based on People Get Ready, and he was actually arrested in London for possession of cannabis and, convicted, actually, and he ended up returning to Jamaica in 1978, and there was still some political unrest going on, and he tried to, sort of bring people together by having the 2 leaders of the 2 opposing political parties shake hand on stage.
Like, was he extradited? When did he come back because he was convicted and they sent him back to Jamaica?
I don't know. I don't think so. He kinda got involved in the Rastafarian lifestyle, and I think smoking was very important to him, or,
Mhm.
marijuana was very important to him as part of that, and so maybe the fact that he could do it more freely. I don't know. I'm not sure what the reason was, but he ended up having, remember I mentioned Michael Manley, the prime minister, who was putting on that first concert. At this later concert, um, he had Michael Manley and the political rival, whose name was Edward Segia. They shook hands on stage, and he was trying to become someone to be a peacemaker, in the country that he loved. So they ended up releasing, 11 albums under the name Bob Marley and the Wailers, and they had all kinds of, awards and credentials throughout his career. Let me just give you a couple of things, and like you said, some of these were posthumously. Um, he received the United Nations Peace Medal, in 1978. Maybe that had something to do with what I was just talking about,
Yeah,
getting
that's
those
cool.
people on stage. Um, the album Legend became the best-selling reggae album of all times.
So what year did that come out? Did that come out after he died?
84. So he died in
Yeah.
'81.
So that's
So
what turned a lot of us on, and I'll bet you that record is like Dark Side of the Moon, where decade after decade after decade, people are still buying that record. It's gotta be one of the top selling albums of all time.
yes, yes, actually it is. It's still thousands of units, thousands of downloads, I guess, these days. Constantly, people are always getting turned on to it. He, as I said, was given the Order of Merit posthumously um, by Jamaica. He was inducted in 1994 into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
What year? What year was he inducted?
94.
Wow.
Rolling Stone ranked him number 11 on its list of greatest artists of all time and number 98 on its list of 200 greatest singers of all time.
It seems low.
Well, you mean number 11 for greatest artists?
No, no, 98.
Oh, for singers? I don't know that he was like, you know, known for his singing. I mean, his singing was
Iconic.
great, but
Well,
um
I bet you there's not 97 better singers than him.
okay, okay. BBC proclaimed Marley's One Love as a song of the millennium. In
Wow.
2001, he was awarded a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Grammys, and he was inducted into the Black Music and Entertainment Walk of Fame, and he has a star on the Hollywood Rock Walk of Fame. So
Wow.
pretty long and storied history
You didn't
for this
mention
guy.
3 Little Birds, which I think
Yeah,
is a song that kind of transcends time, that every few years you'll see it in a movie or you'll hear it,
commercial.
in a commercial or something, and that's one of those songs that poetically is just a beautiful song, and it just, it changes your mood, you know?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
probably one of my top, favorite songs out there.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean it was the original Don't Worry Be Happy, right?
Yeah.
And so he had an album right before he died called Uprising, and that had the Redemption song, which,
Mm,
is
yep,
on the Legend album. And um there's also uh when Legend came out, I believe that there were a lot of new mixes of those songs that were different than the originals, including Buffalo Soldier, right? That had
yep.
been one of his bigger songs, and I think the version on Legend is like a different mix of all of it. Um, he ended up and as I said before, he was a big soccer player, football, as they called it over there. Um, he very much, um, loved that sport. He followed a Brazilian team and was a big fan of, uh,
Pele.
was Pele? Yeah,
Yeah.
Pele was Brazilian, right?
Mhm.
Um, so he ended up having this pain in his toe, and when they did a biopsy, they found out that he had, acral lentiginous melanoma. And this is something that is different than other melanoma because it doesn't really have to do with having your skin um, exposed to the sun, which is what most melanoma is caused by. This is something that is more common with people with darker skin, and it was not a very well known disease at the time. They actually suggested that he amputate his toe. Now, this was 1977, and he decided he didn't want to do that. He ended up having a skin graft to kind of like replace the skin. They pulled the
Mm,
skin off and replaced the toenail. They did some painful stuff, but that ended up being what was his downfall because he had um, cancer in that toe that spread to the rest of his body.
mm.
So he ended up in 1980, they did a tour of Europe, played their biggest show to 100,000 people in Milan, Italy, which was like the biggest show they ever did. He played at Madison Square Garden
Yeah.
and in New York,
Did they
and then
record
in
that?
80
Was that a record?
Madison Square Garden?
Was that a, like, live album?
I don't
I
know.
feel like
That would
I've
be
heard that or something.
I
Maybe
mean, I'm
that
sure they recorded everything and probably if there's money to be made, released it later.
yeah, that would have been some show to go to, huh?
Yeah, yeah, I mean, just to have seen I was 11 in '81, I
So
was
he
10
didn't
in
have a
'80.
lot of American concerts then.
No, no, well, he did that tour, like I said, with Sly and the Family Stone, but that got cut short, and that was with the original Wailers. In 1980, after that Madison Square Garden concert, he collapsed while jogging in Central Park, was taken to the hospital, and they basically found out that the cancer had spread to his brain, lungs,
Because
and
of the
liver
graft.
because of the melanoma that he had had in his toe.
But if they had amputated it, that might not have spread, right? Is that what you were saying?
Nobody knows, right? But that would have maybe given him a better chance of living longer.
And these days, it probably wouldn't even have been a fatal thing.
Yeah, they might not have needed to amputate, but he also felt like amputating part of his body uh, didn't jibe with his Rastafarian
Yeah.
beliefs.
Oh man, what a shame. 36 years old and really just in the prime of it, right?
Yeah, yeah. Um, so he died on May 11th at 36. Um, and supposedly his final words to his son Ziggy were, "On your way up, take me up. On your way down, don't let me down."
I love that. I love that. Yeah. And Ziggy had a little career.
Yeah, yeah. He had Dragonfly, I think, a
Is
song.
it
Big
Ziggy Marley and the Melody Makers? Was that what
and the
they were?
Melody Makers. Yeah, that's right. He ended up having a state funeral in Jamaica on May 21st, and, the prime minister at the time actually, the other prime minister, the one that, not Manley, but the other guy, Edward Sagia, gave his eulogy, said, "His voice was an omnipresent cry in our electronic world. Bob Marley was never seen, he was experienced, which left an indelible imprint on each encounter. Such a man cannot be erased from the mind. He is part of the collective consciousness of the nation."
Yeah, it's crazy when you say that. I'm thinking that you don't see a lot of live shows of his. You can't really picture him singing. You can hear him and you can picture that one picture that you talked about before, that iconic shot. But other than that, he might as well have been from the 1800s because you just don't see any film of him.
He wasn't as documented as other artists.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even though, and we didn't know about him, or at least I said I didn't really know about him until after he was gone.
Yep, same here.
It's what a unique life, huh?
Yeah, yeah. He definitely he called his music rebel music. And it was interesting to say that the idea that rebel music was rock and roll. Well, he kind of turned that reggae, that ska, all those styles into music that had a political message, that had a spiritual message, and but it was never just like sit back and take it, right? There was a lot of calls for justice in the world, and I think that was one of his cool things he did, but he did it in a way that you could vibe to, you know? It didn't feel like you were getting beat over the head by his message.
Definitely, definitely. That's so interesting. Uh, Man, what a great figure to talk about. Thank you for that.
Yeah, so just to wrap up, you can still actually find, um, Bob Marley, or I guess one of his, daughters or granddaughters, um runs a website called Marley Natural. So you can buy heirloom Jamaican cannabis strains that were supposedly the very ones that Bob Marley himself enjoyed, smoking accessories, creams, lotions, etc. Um, and so if you just go to Marley Natural and you'll see the website. And then I thought it was interesting because you and I have talked about this before. I think you made a list of people I think it was you who made a list of people who made the most money, as dead celebrities.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
In 2018, Forbes magazine listed him as the 5th highest earning dead celebrity.
Wow. Wow,
That
that's
was
amazing.
2018. That's
So, like,
been
you've
5
got
years, but
Elvis, and John Lennon, and guys like that. He's right up there with those guys, huh?
yeah, yeah. I think it's because there is still a very steady, I wouldn't say like, hockey stick spike kind of feeling, but there's definitely a steady growth of people who listen to him and go, "Wow, I can dig that," you know?
Yes.
It's it's not something that I it's not something that I seek out to listen to all the time, but when I'm in the mood for it, or even if I'm not in the mood for it and somebody throws on Bob Marley and the Wailers, I will never complain. It always feels right.
Yes. And, there's a reggae channel on Sirius XM, but I feel like maybe it's that particular channel is just specializing in that specific 10-year genre that you're talking about, but it seems like every song is either Bob Marley or Bunny Wailer or,
Peter
Jimmy
Tosh.
Cliff or Peter Tosh, and then they just start over. It doesn't seem like
Yeah.
the music's evolved that mu I'm sure that I'm wrong. I'm sure that in Jamaica, there's more electronic versions of that stuff that are or Latin influenced or whatever, but on those channels, that's still the same 5 guys that they're playing all the time that, but like you say, it never feels wrong, does it?
I think it was, especially at that time in the '60s, '70s, and maybe it became more popular in the '80s, but it is more of a niche kind of, genre on that originated on a fairly small island, with a small very fairly small, group of people.
I wonder
Um,
if he had lived or if he had become more, uh, come to America more, if that music would have changed or like even like he didn't play Woodstock or anything, and he was around then, and he could have been friends with Jimi Hendrix, but he wasn't like around those guys, right? And I
yeah.
wonder if his music would have become more rock or if other music would have become more reggae, if he would have influenced more people, if that style would have been more popular. It was just kind of this isolated thing that was here and then
Yeah,
gone.
literally born on an island, right? The music was, and so it literally and figuratively, isolated. But now with technology and with the way people communicate now and social media and all that kind of stuff, it's a lot harder for those kind of things to just be in their own little world, right?
I mean, Legend
So
is a great record, but it's a greatest hits record,
yeah, that's exactly
and
right.
he only lived long enough to have one of those, you know?
Yeah, and he didn't even live long enough to have it. It came out
Uh,
after he died.
and
So
he's been dead longer than he was alive, you know?
yeah, yeah. No, it's, Bob Marley. And by the way, I probably should have started by saying this. I don't claim to be an expert on Bob Marley. I'm very much a casual, maybe slightly more than casual Bob Marley fan, but I'm not an expert by any means. I just thought, I was looking through my list of people that I think fit our criteria of interesting dead people that maybe a lot of people don't know. They've heard the name, right? I think a lot of people maybe have heard of the name and they know he was a reggae artist, but some of those things about him being biracial and about his spiritual beliefs and getting shot. I mean, that's all stuff that hopefully people found interesting on this episode.
And hopefully, if you only know him from, like, being a pot smoker, hopefully you'll right now go and listen to some of that music because it start with Legend. I mean, just listen to Legend from beginning to end.
Be sure to take a big bong hit first.
It is outstanding music.
It is. It is. High or not, it is high on life. All right, Alex. Well, that's Mr. Marley, not the Christmas one, but the Jamaican one. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I always love it when you're enthusiastic from the outset. Like you kind of lit up when you guessed who it was,
Oh
and that
yeah,
always makes me know it's going to be a good episode.
like you said, who doesn't love Bob Marley?
Yeah, you're crazy if you don't. All right, thanks everybody. We'll talk to you in a week or two.
Bye.